Hello and welcome to the GameDev London podcast, a community of amazing people who love talking about and sharing their love of the details behind making games, whether or not they're actually based in London. I'm Oscar Clark, he, him pronouns, and I am on a quest to understand everything you want to know about game dev, but never dare to ask. And I am delighted today to be joined by the amazing Flo Burchill. Flo, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. So, one of the things we were chatting about is you've got some really interesting experience because whilst you're a game producer and you do various presenting stuff, you've got experience in multiple medias, particularly TV type presentation stuff, and also given what you guys do at Snapfinger Click around Twitch-based gaming, I thought there'd be a whole bunch of really interesting things to talk about. But anyway, that's me talking. Tell us about yourself. What got you into games? What's your interest, and what do you do? I kind of spoiled a little bit of the header, but you tell us what in your own words.
So yeah, my name is Flo. I work for Snapfinger Click. We specialize in multiplayer party games. I started in the games industry as primarily a streamer. I went to university in Brighton, which is where Snapfinger Click is based, and got hired while I was a student just as a streamer. So I worked 1 or 2 days a week just streaming our games, but also other multiplayer party games. And then graduated in 2020, which was an awful year to graduate. And luckily, Snapfinger Click offered me a more permanent position I was assistant producer. No, I wasn't. I was production assistant, and then got promoted to assistant producer. And so yeah, it was a big sort of weird transition from streamer to actually finding out what goes into developing a game. But then I also do presenting. I have a radio show called With the Flow. And I do sort of a lot of TikTok stuff as well.
How did you come up with that name?
I know. Honestly, my name is perfect for puns, especially it rhymes with radio show. It's great.
Yeah, love it. So, I mean, I have to declare my bias. I used to work with Martin back in the day, and Ed, of course. We all worked on PlayStation Home together, and Joe is one of the best people I've ever seen talking about game design on stage as well. So I cajole her on stage at Pocket Gamers at various other events wherever I possibly can, and always have a lot of fun talking to you guys. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that you as a team have done. But I think let's start talking about the presenting, the streaming. Now, because I want to separate the skill sets, because I think again, you tell me if I'm wrong, but my feeling is the skill set of being able to talk confidently on a subject to a camera, to a radio, to whatever, is a very specific kind of skill, and a little different than, say, doing voiceover work, a little different than doing performance in the more traditional classical sense. But I think there's lots of qualities of that you can bring into game dev in wider spaces, and that's kind of what I'm thinking would be interesting to explore. So am I right? Is there something in that? Is there some kind of element of what are the skills that you think talking to camera, talking to radio, talking to a mic bring?
Well, a lot of it is communication skills and being able to starting off presenting and being friendly on camera. That was really important for building our community. But then once you have that community, being able to talk to them candidly about what they like and what they don't like about your game, so then you can implement that in newer games you have coming out. So sort of having a confidence to talk to people behind a screen, but then also on other medias just to get their perspectives. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah,
you went straight into, and I mean, this is good. I heard it. So you're straight into. I'm talking to people and I'm implementing what I'm finding back into a game, and I totally agree with that. But what I think I'm trying to get at, and I'm because I spend a lot of time on stage and I've done a lot of PR stuff. I think there's something about the difference between a broadcast message, which is the kind of stuff I've tended to do, and I think what a streamer does in terms of the dialogue. Mm-hmm. I think there's a much more when you're doing classical PR training, when you're doing classical kind of journalistic style approach stuff, you're tending, again, maybe summarizing, my feeling is you're tending to be broadcast rather than dialogue. Is that fair, or am I missing something?
Yeah, although most of the streams that I have done have been more talking with our community because it's been on Twitch. Those are more of there's obviously a big part of presenting in it, but one of the main reasons for our streaming is for the dialogue between us and the community. It's just an easy way to get to talk to them every week and keep them up to date with everything we're doing. But then I suppose I don't have as much
actively playing with the community.
Yeah, absolutely. All of them are in viewer interactive. Playing games with them.
And it's getting that idea that when you are playing these social experiences and you're literally playing the kind of the awkward game with them, you're getting those immediate responses. Then actually got a stake in what's going on.
Yeah.
As opposed to maybe say a more traditional streamer who might be playing, I don't know, Call of Duty or Fortnite or whatever, or some deck building game, I mean, where they're playing and their play is what is being talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a friend of mine who does a lot of like indie horror type games, and they're all waiting for his jump shot because his squealing is what makes them laugh.
Yeah.
And that it feels to me more of a not exhibitionist. That's the wrong phrase. It's too strong. But it's more of it feels to me that's more of an output than an input. You seem to do a lot more momentary stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, all of our we do a 4-hour stream every Wednesday and Thursday, and it is the entire time is playing with the viewers, whether it's with them logging in on a browser to join as a player or playing through Twitch chat. It's all we've heavily pushed the playing with viewers.
So, but 4 hours, I mean, that's a huge amount of time. I mean, how do you handle that? I mean, I honestly, the amount of toilet breaks I would have to take is ridiculous. But then I'm an old man, so we shouldn't go into that. But I mean, how do you prepare, for something of that duration on a regular, consistent? Because let's face it, consistency was what makes that work, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I love it, so it doesn't feel like work. There were some occasions where I'd start work at 9 and work a full 9 to 5 day, and then 6 till 10 be streaming. And again, that was fine unless I hadn't had enough sleep the day before, in which case a lot of energy drinks. Prepare by having food beforehand, or know that I have a good meal waiting for me when I get home. But generally the 4 hours would go by so quickly because I just loved doing it, and it doesn't feel like work. It's playing games with people that are lovely and a part of your community and are interested in what you have to say and interested to play your games. It's easy, in my opinion.
But you must be at least having the first time doing it, having to do a lot of prep. I mean, understanding the game in detail, knowing how you're going to filter time, how much of the time are you asking how much time are you talking about things other than the current moment of gameplay? I mean, are you broaching conversations, or what sort of style do you do? I mean, there's a lot of things that go, I think, around the subject.
Yeah, so a lot of our games that we stream are sort of conversation starters anyway, especially playing games like Awkward. Those are fantastic to play, especially with a community that's all over the world and has completely different views and principles and things like that. The whole point of Awkward is there is no right answer. However, everyone feels that their opinion is the right answer, and so it's a great way to speak to people on the other side of the world and get their perspective, and then have a good, healthy debate. Sometimes it would get a little bit touchy, but generally healthy debates, and it's really educational for myself and for others to hear other people's perspectives and why they feel that. And so most of our games, because I'd co-host them. There were a few times where during the pandemic I was by myself, but most of the time I would have another person there. And so that's another person to riff off of. And quite often I was always really good friends with my co-host. And so saying things like, oh my gosh, on the way here, I saw this. And you always have stories about your day or just general stories about your life and sharing them with the community. They tell you what's been happening with them. So a lot of the games, I think there were quite a few times where we just would completely forget we were playing a game and just we're so caught up in conversation. So it was very much, it was talk about everything, not necessarily just the games.
No, exactly. I think that's an interesting way of looking. I mean, I obviously I think you're more of the extrovert class, like I am, than some people are. But I know that a lot of people who are more introverted, who are coming at this kind of role, and they I don't know. My impression is that there's a safety in using an internet-based kind of mechanism than they wouldn't do the same thing in person. If they were confronted with a room of 50 people, that might be horrifying. But sat in a virtual space with 50 people talking to them feels a little bit more safe. Is that fair? Or I know
Definitely,
there
yeah.
are issues with it, but yeah.
I personally, I'm just as happy on stage as behind the camera, but I know from speaking to other co-hosts, even my friends that aren't involved in games but have YouTube channels, they would not be seen on a stage. Even talking in front of a class at university, they couldn't do it. But then behind a camera to millions, not a problem, because it's not really like you're talking to anyone. It's slightly different on Twitch because you're getting immediate feedback from the chat. But if you're filming yourself like a pre-record for something else later on, you can just pretend it's like just talking to myself in the mirror.
Yay! But I mean, I do think there's an advantage for the extroverts like us, where we can get out there and have no shame in that kind of nice way. And, where we can kind of engage, and it does help. There's a rapidity that I think is useful, but I think that there's every different taste out there. I think anyone who has enjoys either playing the game or talking about the game can find a way to communicate for themselves the thing that matters to them, and there's usually an audience for that.
Absolutely. There's even a lot of streamers don't even use webcam, so you've got no issue of like being worried about your appearance or being worried about how you're presenting yourself. There's also like VTubers where you use like an animation rather than your face. So there's lots of different you can easily do it. Yeah.
But that being said, I think just because you can doesn't mean you're going to get the audience.
No.
So obviously you've got a game, so that gives you an advantage. But when the games are new, when the team's new, getting that audience, I'm assuming, is tricky.
Really tough.
Yeah, really tough. I mean, I've mentioned consistency, but I mean, what are the key factors, do you think, to be able to go, particularly when you're starting out, to go from nothing to something?
So I would say having a niche. So our niche is multiplayer party games. If you have a game that you're particularly good at or particularly interesting to watch, you don't have to, even if you're just like you were saying, the horror game, you could be not that good at it, but as long as your reactions and it's interesting to just watch you playing it. So having a niche like that, where you being consistent with playing that particular game or that particular genre of game, that will bring in those. That's your audience that you want. And then consistency with time and day, so people know when to expect you. Having a Discord server where you can talk to your community outside of your streaming times to build up a relationship, but then also be able to let them know if your streaming time changes, so people don't feel let down if they turn up on your normal streaming time and you're not there. They won't feel put out. But those are really important. And then as for the actual streams, high quality audio and camera is important, because you want it, if people are watching you and it's pixelated, that's not enjoyable. If people are listening to you and it's echoey or tinny, that's not enjoyable, and people will click on your stream and then instantly be out. But then in streams, particularly for hours, being engaging. When a new person comes in, you're so excited to have a new person in the stream. This is a potential new person in your community. So it's like, hi, welcome in. Where have you come from? How's your day been? One that I really like that our old streamer Joe used to do would be like, rate your day out of 10 right now, and they'd give a number, and it's like, okay, we're going to get it to this number by the end of the stream. Really hard at improving their day, because a big part of Twitch, which I love, is there's some people that don't have the privilege of having a lively social life, and so Twitch is the opportunity for them to talk to someone every day, to engage with people, and to socialize. And I experienced that importance during the pandemic when we were not going out and not seeing people. And then even times when I've been when I moved home for a bit and didn't have any of my friends around, it was just like when you're craving that social interaction, and you can immediately go on and you have people that you can talk to who will talk back and things to discuss. I think that's really important. And so that's for our niche, that's an area that would be important for building your
No, completely. And I think, like I say, there's different, finding a niche, I think, is massively important. I mean, probably bore everyone who listens to me, but I often talk about Columbo, the TV show,
okay.
Particularly because it's all about predictable surprise.
Mm-hmm.
You always know that by the end of the show, he's going to tell you just one more thing. He's going to say that, and he's then going to explain not that who did it, because we already know who did it because we see at the beginning of the show. He's going to tell you how he solved it.
Wait, was it called Columbo?
Columbo is a TV show in the 1970s, a detective show, and this idea of predictable surprise really transforms the way that you work. So I think for me, the consistency is got to be joined with surprise and excitement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of sums up a lot of the things that we try to do whenever we're building experiences. And even in a situation like this, I mean, I don't really plan the podcasts that I do. I kind of like it's a conversation, but we know we're going to get to something. We know we're on a journey. We don't quite know yet what the journey is going to be, but we know it. We know the rough direction of it, and I'm looking forward to that moment, because we get these moments coming out of it, which hopefully people who are interested in the game development process are going to go, oh, hang on a minute, that's how I should think about how to promote my game.
Mm-hmm.
I can do this myself. I don't necessarily have to, or I can engage with these streamers. These are the things I want to look for.
Yeah.
Consistency, predictability, but also, like you said, social engagement.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's kind of what I'm hoping to get out of these sessions.
Yeah.
And by the way, if anyone hasn't noticed, the reason we were talking about awkward is because I was a Kickstarter backer, and the board game version, he says, is up there. So anyway, so let's go back to this thing. So we're talking about using Twitch to create an audience and build an audience. Now, the next thing in my mind is, obviously, as a game company, you want people to play and invest and buy into the game. But with the streamer, I don't think we're necessarily talking about a direct, here we go, we spend this much time and now this many people will convert into playing the game. I think it's quite the opposite in some ways. It's about building an audience awareness, and it's then hoping that indirectly that audience decides to tell other people about it, and they invest. Is that fair?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of research on how to market our games, because we're a relatively small company. We don't have the AAA budget for marketing, and so a lot of it is putting in the research what can work. And for example, TikTok, I love, is a great cheap way to get our game out there. But in doing our research, we discovered that the most effective way to get someone to buy your game is not through them hearing it through Twitter, not through them hearing it on Reddit or other social medias. It's word of mouth, which I can absolutely agree with myself. The most recent, probably 3 games I've bought have not been through seeing an ad. It's been through one of my friends saying, oh, this game's really good, you have to play this. Or it's because you trust them. You trust them a lot more than you would a randomer on social media. So through creating a community on Twitch, even if those people don't necessarily, if our actual direct audience don't necessarily buy the game, they have a good impression of us. They trust us as a company. They enjoy our games. They've played them. If one of their friends goes, oh, we're having a party tonight and we want to play a game, they'll go, oh, I can tell you a fantastic company who make these games. And so that is what can convert into sales in a sort of a more genuine way than through marketing.
Yeah, authenticity, massively. The classic joke is sincerity is really important. If you can fake it, you'll be rich. Obviously not suggesting you fake it. Just no. But I think there's something about this which is, it's not something I think we work on in isolation. So having an authentic and delightful, regular, consistent, predictable engagement with an audience, whatever means that is, combined with then promoting it through other means, whether it's social posts, whether it's paid UA, whatever it might be, that brand building exercise, I think, is massively important. And I think what you're doing in terms of like putting the community and the social play together at the heart of everything you do is really the lesson that a lot of teams out there need to learn. I mean, particularly if you're making a mobile game right now, cost of acquisition is so high. Why aren't you engaging people? They have their phone in their pocket.
Yeah.
OBS is native now on mobile. You know, you can Twitch directly from your phone.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for acting like a human in companies. And something we've learned from TikTok is if people know immediately that you're trying to sell them something, not interested. You want to seem genuine. You want to seem like a human. And it's the same with social media. There's been a huge change in the voice that companies have on all social media, but especially things like TikTok, making memes. It used to be of this like professionalism. We are one like company, whereas now I can reply to people saying I rather than we, because they know it's a real human talking back to them, not a company. And I think that, and especially it was the social media manager of Among Us, Victoria Tran, does it perfectly. It's such a good. It's because it's still professional, and but it's just friendly, and it's more endearing to the community for sure. So I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I feel quite lucky because Lara, who's our she's our influencer manager, but she's been a lot of our community, has just got that natural voice.
Yeah.
And equally, Ben, our BD guy, frankly, we're starting to get him to do streams now because he just is such a gamer. He's such a game head. And it's so obvious when you see somebody who really loves something like that. You know, when you see him playing some of these games and you realize just how much he's going to win.
Yeah.
I mean, that sort of thing. I mean, obviously, different audiences, different personalities, but I mean, that sort of stuff. It's actually kind of part of the whole identity of what we're trying to do is that put the community back at the heart, and not just for marketing, also for how you design, how you schedule activities, and it's pointless. Well, obviously, you're speaking of the converted. It's pointless trying to build something that players don't already. You don't really know players are going to want.
Yeah, I have. In fact, after this podcast, I'm going to be streaming the newest build of an upcoming party game called Befuddle, and just to test it, because there's a few bugs that I need to test that I need more than just myself playing it, and our community love it because it's a chance to see the behind the scenes and the build up of a game, and also it's fun for me to be able to show, because especially as a producer, so there's a lot of these changes I'm helping, a lot of the new things in the build I've helped to implement, or we've been discussing the design together, and so seeing it firsthand being played for the first time with the community and them enjoying it means that it feels great. It's like, oh, okay, maybe this is a good game, because it's so difficult when you've played a game so many times. I've done so much QA on this that I don't know if it's good. I think it is, but I've played it so many times that I don't know. But
well,
so
that opens a brand new. This is why I like it. A predictable surprise. I know. I always know something's going to come up. That's really interesting because there's so much difference between what I think you're doing there, which is play testing in publicly, openly, versus research.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm a big believer in these kind of play publicly things to experiment, show vulnerability, because that's basically part of authenticity anyway. But how much do you rely on the feedback from that process? I don't mean this in a disingenuous way, but obviously they will have an affinity with you as somebody they're watching. You'll be showing them a game. How much can you rely on the feedback that they're giving you in those circumstances, do you think?
Yeah, you have to be careful, because also everyone has personal opinions, and we're not going to change a whole game because one person disliked one particular thing. So it's a lot of playing it a few times. We also we've done something new with Awkward 2, where we've released we've sent certain people, some like press and some streamers, a preview edition for them to play, and we then watch those streams and hear the feedback from the streamer and the audience. And if the same thing's coming up a lot, we know for sure, okay, this is this is how a lot of people are going to feel, and then we'll change it. But we do actually listen to our community probably more than people might imagine. When I'm play testing these games, I'm writing down, my notes page is huge. I'm writing down everything that people are saying. And especially with accessibility is really important to us in our games. We think games should be able to be played by everyone. And we have some members in our community who are disabled who tell us, you need to change this. This was really hard for me to do. And we've always implemented that and listened to them, and they're really valuable to us because accessibility is so valuable to us.
I'm an ambassador for special effects, which I probably don't deserve, but I know you guys are keen on that as well. So I think that's a massively important thing that we generally, engage people, because let's face it, we should be playing on a level playing field anyway.
Absolutely.
So where I'm going with that is because obviously I'm coming at it from a researcher, kind of like data analyst type mindset too. I'm not properly trained. I'm just deeply data philic, for want of a better phrase. Basically, one of the tricks I've always found is that you want to do this kind of testing, but you also need to make sure that in the background you've got something where you've got testing, you can observe people, or get information from people who don't have an emotional connection.
Yeah.
So we're very much keen on the doing. I love going to shows, but if I can run something like a playtest cloud or an antidote test where there's an online thing where it's being curated, the people playing are curated on my behalf, and they don't know who I am, they don't know anything about the game, they've got no preconceptions, they've got no emotional stake on whether I'm going to succeed or fail. I'm going to get some really interesting data. And I find the comparison between watching what people say, seeing what they actually do, and then seeing what happens when you get a completely unrelated person, untainted by my influence, doing as well. I think it's that combination that really helps me get sensible to do.
Definitely, yeah.
But it's tricky, isn't it? Because this stuff is expensive to do, especially if you're trying to separate from what you're doing. So I'll never say to anyone, don't test in front of other people. Just bear in mind that they're either going to say, this is great, or they're going to say, this is terrible. But they'll always tell you what game they would make, not necessarily the game you're currently making.
Yeah, although our community has been, because we've been streaming for quite a while, the people that join us on our playtest, it's normally at a random time. So it will be the true fans that come and join us for those playtests. And a lot of them are very honest with us. They're the ones that help us out in the stream. If the audio is not good, they'll be like, by the way, guys, you sound awful. And so they're valuable. Yeah. And so, I do, sometimes their words can be a little hard hitting on a slightly on certain days, but they are really important. And generally I do trust that they'll be honest.
Getting an audience that will be honest and brutal, but in a positive, constructive way.
Yeah, it comes from a place of love.
Yeah, exactly. And I find it really hard where a lot of people, one thing we always try and do is get people to think about not the solution itself, but to identify what it is about the problem that's actually, because quite often I'm finding that someone on that particular day, the way something is described gets slammed, but it's not the thing, it was the way it was said that that wasn't working, for example. Anyway, we could pursue that for a long time, and we're not going to go into that, but so we talked a lot about kind of like presenting and sharing, and I wanted to kind of just compare that with your other work, the non-game stuff. Are there any kind of lessons that you think you've taken from the non-game stuff, or the not directly game stuff, into games, but also that you've taken from the games process into the non-game stuff?
That's a good question. Probably, so streaming live is it's a much different experience than, like we were talking about, filming directly to a camera where you can stop it, edit it, start again. It's weird actually, when I find I make fewer mistakes. I made a mistake then. I find I make fewer mistakes when I'm streaming live than I do when I'm on a camera, because I know that I can make mistakes on a camera. It would take me 3 or 4 takes to sometimes get one sentence out on a TikTok, because I know I can stop, restart, stop, restart. But then with my radio shows, which are broadcasted live, with Twitch, which is broadcasted live, you don't have the chance to, you can like mumble and fumble and stuff, but you can, generally it's got to be pretty coherent. And I think a skill that I learned more through Twitch is sort of improvising and dealing with a situation. If we ever got trolls in chat saying heinous things, being able to subtly ban them or mute them or, you know, time them out or whatever. Well, would always ban them if they're saying heinous things, but then continue to not seem phased, because that's important. You know, trolls want a reaction, don't give them a reaction. And then be able to, and then move on. So that's a skill that I developed. And then it means that when I go onto my radio show, if the mic suddenly stops working while I'm on air, being able to sort of quickly deal with that in a smooth and professional way is something that definitely Twitch has helped me to do. And also, it's thinking on the spot. It's a certain part of your brain, and that's the part of the brain that doesn't work if I haven't had enough sleep. So it was the night before something like a radio show or streaming, I need to make sure that my brain's awake, because that is you have to sort of unlock this ability to ad-lib and improvise.
I think that's really interesting. The closest I think I've come to that is one time I was doing a radio interview in a conference in Spain, and it was on live Spanish radio, and I had someone translating the questions to me and then translating my answers live with a microphone in my ear.
Mm-hmm.
That was the weirdest conversation I've ever had in my life. And there's something about having to do it live where I managed to cope. But if you told me I was going to do that and I could record it separately, I'm sure I would have absolutely fluffed it.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, there's literally a magic about, maybe it's practice as well, but I feel like there's a magic about the live. So maybe it's the case that we know that once it's done, if it's live, it's done. We can't go back and reverse it. So we stop worrying about it, and therefore let's het up about what we're going to say, because we just have to get on with it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, also adrenaline, you know, you get that push.
Yeah, and it is fun. I mean, honestly, I cannot describe and how news journalists do it with the, directors telling them in the air, in 5 minutes, you're going to be talking about this. It's like, no, don't tell me what you're doing in 5 minutes. I'm doing this.
Yeah.
So,
like multitasking. Yeah.
So, because I think it's interesting that you kind of cover both aspects. Now let's take this further. So now we've talked about performing and talking about the game, the authenticity, the importance of that, the lesson. And I think actually I want to stay with this a little bit longer, because there's something you said about the practice of working in live and the problem solving aspect of that, the ability to appear not flustered, particularly around toxicity. And I thought that was an interesting area too. So, is there, how else do you think you can apply that that ability to not be flustered? Is there something else in that? Because I feel like that's a particular skill.
Do you mean applying that in games or outside of
game development, in wider life? I mean, I'm just interested.
Do you know what? I think it is. It's almost like putting on a poker face. I am rubbish at lying. I can't lie to save my life. But I would like to think that I can appear calm in stressful situations, because of these skills of pretending everything's fine, even though someone's just said the most horrific thing to my entire community, and so I suppose that being able to sort of not show your emotions, it will be great in pitches as well. When you're pitching a game, being able to have that air of confidence and security, even if inside you're like, what is going on? So I think that's probably that skill can be used in live situations, like face-to-face conversations. But I would say I still can't lie despite that.
No, I can definitely handle
people close to me.
Oh, I totally get that, and I definitely get how I can keep the ball rolling. But if I've got a technical problem, I find it really hard not to get really annoyed by the tech, and that's really hard to hide if you're already really annoyed. So I admire your versatility.
Yeah, and I will say that my experience of being annoyed about things, especially like tech, means it will take longer to fix because I'm flustered, I'm seeing red. Whereas when I first started streaming with we stream on like Streamlabs, it's for someone that had never done it before, it was unbelievably complex to get my head around it, and there was basically a technical issue every single time we streamed. But you learn that there are ways to fix it, and so having a clear head and pretending that everything's fine means that you get to get it figured out in a quicker and more enjoyable way for the viewers.
No, completely, and I totally feel that one. It's an interesting sort of space when you're, like I say, OBS. I found when I first tried using it, Streamlabs, whatever. I think I should have been able to be the most obvious person to just know how to do it, because I've done every kind of tech imaginable. I've done online forever. Why did I take me so long to get? And then it took me. One of the guys that I was working with at the time just got somebody to provide me with an OBS kind of like layout, and then I realized how simple it was. It was just the way the UX worked that my brain didn't connect the dots between the various pieces.
Yeah, I've been we've hired 3 new streamers these last couple of months who have zero experience in streaming, OBS, anything like that, and so it was my job to train them up. And it made me realize actually how it is complicated, because I've been using it now for nearly 4 years. I know it. I know the ins and outs. I know, and to me it makes sense now. But I completely get why it's so confusing to a first user. Yeah,
it's not. It doesn't feel particularly a first-time user experience friendly.
No, yeah, and I will say that so when I first started streaming, it was in the pandemic. I had 2 streams, I think, in our streaming booth in our office, and then the pandemic started and we were streaming from home. So I didn't even get training from someone else. I just had to teach myself. And that's part of the reason why we had so many technical issues at the start. But then it meant that because I had those lots of mistakes, I learned from them, which made me over time a better streamer and more understanding of the software.
So again, you're coming at it from the point of view of a streamer inside the studio, and you're also doing production work around the games themselves. I think I love that. That's fantastic. A lot more people should be connecting the dots between the marketing, community, audience, and the game development. But what are the biggest challenges of that process? I mean, I'm assuming time, but are there other practical challenges as well?
Yeah, I suppose being able to stay energetic after, because that's how the most successful streams are the ones where it looks like you're having fun. People don't want to watch someone that looks like they're 10 hours had no hours sleep. So I suppose time, but so it can be frustrating when you are playing new builds and they don't work with the community. That can be really disheartening. But generally it's always been a positive experience, because we stream our own games, but then also other multiplayer party games. And so being able to see, especially because we have Twitch integration within all of our games that we released, and which is quite rare with games. Not a lot of games have this integration, and Twitch is constantly evolving, like all platforms are. And so being very present on it, streaming twice a week on the platform that we're integrating our game with, and also playing other games that have used that, and then sort of like seeing what works well and then putting that into our own games is really, really, really valuable.
And I think what you're doing is exactly what people talk about in Silicon Valley as to eat your own dog food.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean that in a great way. I think that's, you are literally using your own experiences as part of every aspect of the process, from marketing, but also design, and integrating that into your testing process, your market testing process, which is obviously a different thing, and being constantly in touch with what's going on, I think is an incredibly powerful thing. So are you finding that that's driving new content ideas as much as it is? I mean, or do you find that your audience is, yes, you're doing these social games, but are you finding yourself the audience wants more of what you've got rather than something new?
I think a mix of two. The reason why we've made Awkward 2 rather than a brand new IP is because people loved the first Awkward, but we were hearing a lot of the same things about what people like, the changes people would want to see, which we've implemented into the Awkward 2. But then because we've created video games of things like Family Feud and Trivial Pursuit, and so people always ask us, please can you make a video game of this show, please can you make a video game of this, so people, our community, but especially lots of people come to us because they know that we've got a lot of Buzz developers. And so always we have people asking us, do a Buzz game, do another Buzz game. So our community are very much in that multiplayer party game niche, and so they like what we've created. But then also because our games are quite different, as in they're all different art styles, they are completely different games, despite the fact they're under the genre of either trivia or like just multiplayer party games. They are all different. They all have completely different mechanics. It's so that they are different, and so when we're streaming, some viewers much prefer some games, some viewers much prefer others, but generally I'd say they're happy with what we're doing.
Well, I mean, I'm surprised they haven't someone hasn't suggested some Toad-based murder mystery game, but that's a that's a very niche thing that very few people in the audience here will understand. So I'm not going to explain. Anyway, sorry, Joe and Martin did that when they were
Frog. Was it? What was it called?
It's called now Frog. Toad. Frog. No, and it's some amphibian murder mystery. Very cute. Very cute. Yeah. Anyway, so we've been talking about kind of like the production process. I mean, in terms of so when you were starting out and you started out in this streamer role, this transition into a much more production focused thing is a fairly unusual way into the system, I think, or has been. Are you saying that? Do you think this is rather than coming in as a QA person and then getting involved in game development? Do you think there's going to be an increasing avenue for people to come in as a streamer and then get more involved in game development?
Yeah, because it just, first of all, just getting into the community, into the industry. That's a very easy way to do it in terms of, not easy, but being a streamer, you are immediately part of the industry because you're streaming games, and that's a very important job in the industry. So and because it's one that you can technically do yourself through buying a mic and using a webcam, it's fairly accessible to most people. But then, I think it depends on what kind of streamer you are. If it's concentrating on technical, the technical mechanics of the game, then you'll be more likely to be able to build up like a portfolio from it. But I will say that it is rare. I think I was very lucky to have it. I think it's because especially in like a production role, I was completely brand new to games. I had to learn all the acronyms. It was the first few months I was kind of completely in the dark, but luckily had the confidence to go, what on earth does that mean? Please explain to me how to learn.
We did a document once of all of the terms used in games.
Yeah.
It was 14 pages at 10-point font.
Yeah, I'm still learning, especially with talking to the programmers. It's pretty intense from someone that has had no experience in actually the development of games. But like I said, mine was a fairly odd way to go in, but because I did a degree in languages, so like the communications degree, and my ability I had a degree, so it showed that I could get myself organized, and that's an important thing for doing production work.
Just for clarity, were you intending on getting a game-specific job, or was it the presentation part of it that you were most interested in?
Yeah, so literally, if you asked me, even when I graduated, what job do you want to have? Didn't even consider games. I've always loved games ever since like really, really young. I've been obsessed with games, whether it be like card games, board games. I always have a pack of cards with me everywhere I go. I love being entertained through games.
Yeah.
And so then, and I'd played a lot of multiplayer party games like Buzz before I even, I know, great, before I even got this job. And so, and I do feel a little bit like an imposter because I know that there's so many people that are trying to get into the games industry with the intention to get into the industry, whereas I kind of accidentally fell into it. But I love it so much. And I think a lot of my friends were surprised because the year that I got the job as a streamer, which then developed onto this like full-time job, they were the gamers. I lived with 5 boys. They had a gaming room, and they're like, sorry, out of our entire house, you're the one that now works in the gaming industry. How did that happen? But again, watching them game for hours was really helpful for me, for my knowledge. And so, yeah, I do feel I'm extremely fortunate for the way that I fell into the industry, but I wouldn't change it. I love it, and I feel, to begin with, I didn't know what on earth was going on, but I feel fully involved now, and I love the community. And it's weird, but it's, everyone has a different path.
Oh, I mean, you mentioned Buzz there again, and one of my favorite anecdotes is I was at E3 in whatever year it was, and I knew Andy because we worked together when I was at 3, and Andy, we were at this bar in LA, and he said, yeah, we just had this meeting with a big console company. Can't tell you what it is, but it involves buttons. And that was the first time I heard about what was then going to become.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much all it is, Buzz, just buttons. Yeah.
Literally, you press the buttons, rock and roll.
Yeah.
But it was such a pivotal kind of way of playing. Martin, who obviously you work with, did a fantastic design of a Buzz-related space in PlayStation Home, where you would run around. Literally, there would be the buttons represented in the space, and your avatar, you would literally run to the point, the button related to the answer, and then you get a chance to move. It was fantastic. One of my favorite spaces we had in PlayStation Home. So anyway, so with all of that in mind, obviously, we've been talking about streaming. We've been talking about being a producer. We're talking about and obviously now you've moved to Canada on the job as well. So that's pretty damn good. You're obviously, we talked about how you got into games. What is the sort of one thing you'd want somebody listening to this to take away from? What's the one lesson you've learned in getting into games and communicating with players that you think people should be paying attention to if they're making games today?
Well, the importance of listening to your community, and having a human voice with them, and play testing with them on Twitch or whatever. It's really interesting. There's been a move as well towards revealing your game early on. We used to, the first few games that we released, we didn't do any prep. We just launched them, published them, and then sort of the marketing happened after that. Whereas the 2 Befuddle and Awkward 2 that we've got coming out this year, we pretty much very early into development made the Steam pages for them so people could wishlist them, and keeping them up to date with changes, asking them like, what do you guys think about this? Doing competitions of I want to do one. There's a cat in Befuddle and we don't know what to name it, and so I want to ask the community. So doing things like that and just involving them, because gaming is fun. Gaming is a fun thing, and if you can make the development fun for the community as well, I think that's just as good as having a fun game.
No, I think that's massive. I mean, for me, this eat your own dog food thing is massive, and it can't be underestimated. We believe in putting games live as soon as possible. Basically, as soon as there's more than an hour's worth of gameplay, I want it on the early access space. But the difficulty with that is you've got to be clear and honest and upfront with the audience to say, we're still making this. The reason we've got it out there is so that you can be part of the process. And the fact that you're out there, you're sitting talking on Twitch every week is massive. And I wish I had the bandwidth for our team to be able to do that. At the moment, we do have one of our games streaming regularly on a weekly basis, but we've got to do that with all of them. And I think your tenacity to be able to run those long streams and deliver that audience feedback into the production process as well is fantastically powerful. And the more people that pay attention to that, the more successful their games will be.
Yeah, especially indie, especially indie, when you haven't got the money to put billboards up.
But honestly, I think it's not just indie. I think it's anyone making a game right now. They're not paying attention to the fact that the whole marketing shift has been so dramatically towards actual people.
Yeah.
And your point about being human, to me, that matters a lot. I mean, being it's kind of one of those sort of difficult things. I wear the crazy hat and have the twirly moustache because I think it's a funny joke, but it's part of being human and being willing to talk to people, whatever they're doing. It's part of the reason why I do these podcasts is because I want to talk to game devs. So I don't assume that I know everything.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, what we're doing it if we're not trying to make games for other people.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, on that note, thank you, Flo. That has been fantastic and lovely chatting to you. Is there anywhere, if people wanted to get hold of you or talk to you or find out more about what you're doing, what's the best channels to go through?
So my Twitter is at Flo Burchill. My Instagram as well. I sometimes post funny clips and things on there. It's at FloEllaBee, FLOELLABEE. I'm trying to get it to Flo Burchill, but someone else has taken that name. I'm not very happy about it. I am the only Flo Burchill on everything, so I don't know who it is. But anyway, I'm going to be at the Toronto Pocket Gamer Connects in July. I'm doing some presenting and moderating for an indie panel there, I'm hoping to do more with my on-stage presenting at gaming events. So I'll try and make as many as I can. If you spot me, I look like this, come and say hi.
Thank you very much. Fantastic stuff. I'll hopefully join you in Toronto, but it's up in the air at the moment whether I'm going to be able to make it or not, sadly. But anyway, it's been fantastic talking to you. This, delighted to say, has been your GameDev London podcast, and we have been talking to the marvelous Flo Burchill about the joy of going from into the streaming, into production, and how integrated that process is, and how important it is to think about your audience and be a person, a human being. For goodness sake, we can actually be real, and actually, the more real we are, the more engaging we are, the more we learn about what people want, the more we deliver. And to be honest, if we could take anything else from these podcasts, making games for an audience is, for me, the most fundamental thing that makes a difference between a hobby and a professional process. And so on that note, thank you very much. And please, as I say, like, subscribe, and do all of the other usual factors. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Flo. And this has been your GameDev London podcast.